So this is extremely disturbing, outrageous, careless, insane. This story is unbelievable, but it is the truth. It's real. It happened. A group of cabinet heads got together on Signal, an app. This is an unsecured app. It's more secure than other apps if you're going to be texting and messaging people, but it's still not a skiff. And what they were doing should have been done in a skiff. So a lot of cabinet heads got together on Signal and they planned war with Yemen. They actually gave away national security information, secrets, top secret information over a Signal app. And how was this discovered? Well, because part of the thread, they accidentally added an Atlantic journalist, one that's not even friendly to the Trump administration, one who Trump has called out and criticized a number of times. This journalist was somehow accidentally added to this thread where cabinet heads illegally, actually, and we'll go over why it was illegal, waged war with Yemen and gave away national secrets. So this is the story. This is from The Atlantic. The journalist is Jeffrey Goldberg, and he at first thought, like anybody would think, that it was a joke or somebody was trying to bait him into some sort of, some giving information or taking information and putting it out there and thinking he's a great journalist. And really it was just all a big, bunch of bad information. So Jeffrey Goldberg was at first skeptical when he first saw on a Signal app a person named Michael Waltz adding him, wanting to message him. Now, Michael Waltz is Trump's national security advisor, I believe, is who Michael Waltz is. Yes, he is the national security advisor. Okay. So Michael Waltz, the national security advisor. So he's thinking, oh yeah, right. The national security advisor wants to message me on Signal. Okay, sure. We'll go along with this. And he went ahead and, accepted the addition and didn't really think anything of it. Just thought, okay, we'll see. This is probably just a spoof. So a couple of days later, he receives a notice from Michael Waltz establishing what is called a Houthi PC small group. And the message from this Michael Waltz character says, team, establishing a principals group for coordination on Houthis, particularly for over the next 72 hours. My deputy, Alex Wong, is pulling together a Tiger team at deputies agency's chief of staff level, following up from the meeting in the sit room, which is situation room, this morning for action items, and we'll be sending that out later this evening. And then the message continued, please provide the best staff POC from your team for us to coordinate with over the next couple of days and over the weekend. Thanks. So over the next couple of hours, a bunch of names started popping into this chat thread, and it was a bunch of aides helping cabinet level people, including Pete Hegseth, Marco Rubio, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, Tulsi Gabbard, J.D. Vance, there were John Ratcliffe for the CIA. There were all of these different cabinet level officials, and their aides were popping in, adding them into this chat. And again, Jeffrey Goldberg just thought, yeah, okay, this is just a big joke. Well, but, I'll just sit back and kind of watch and see what they talk about or whatever. And he became, he was skeptical the entire time until this was actually confirmed. So I just want to kind of fast forward and sort of give away the plot here, but this was confirmed. This actually was them. And they actually were planning war with the Houthis in a Signal app. This has been confirmed now. They've admitted it. And now they're trying to backtrack on some of the stuff that they said. But the journalist was like, I don't know if this is real, but it turns out it was. So in the text chain, let me actually just show you some of the texts that ended up coming about. So they started this a couple of days earlier. And then when they started to actually start talking about Yemen, these are the types of things that were said. So J.D. Vance comes in and says, Pete Hegseth, if you think we should do it, let's go. I just hate bailing Europe out again. And J.D. Vance then says, let's just make sure our messaging is tight here. And if there are things we can do up front to minimize risk to Saudi oil facilities, we should do it. So they're already starting to coordinate bombing Yemen. And the journalist doesn't want to give, too much national security information in the piece. So he says that he actually skips over and he's not revealing all of the text messages because it gives out actual national security information. But I mean, this journalist shouldn't have even been there. Imagine if they just would have accidentally added somebody else who wasn't even an American or a journalist, who, wouldn't have hesitated to use this information against the country. I mean, this is why you're supposed to do this stuff in a skiff. So it goes on to say that the first thing that he noticed was that J.D. Vance that responded first saying, team, I'm out for the day. doing an economic event in Michigan, but I think we're making a mistake, is what JD Vance said. The Vance account goes on to state 3% of U.S. trade runs through the Suez, 40% of European trade does. There is a real risk that the public doesn't understand this or why it's necessary. The strongest reason to do this is, as POTUS said, to send a message. So that actually precedes this text message that you're seeing here on the screen of JD Vance saying, if you think we should do it, then okay, let's go. At first, JD Vance, being an America First guy, was actually hesitant about this. He was sitting there like, 2%, 3% of US trade runs through the Suez Canal. 40% is Europe. So this isn't for us. This isn't something that's going to be good for America. 3% of our trade runs through this route. The beneficiaries of this route are Europe, the Middle East, and China, actually. The US only has 3%. So he's saying, there's a real risk that Americans are going to find out about this and that Americans are going to realize, what do we have to do with the Suez Canal? Oh, nothing? 3% of our trade goes through there? That's minimal. Let's not get into a war over 3% of our trade. Let's just reroute or whatever. And so he's right to say, I don't think the public is going to understand this. So the only reason to do this is to send a message. But for who are you sending a message to? You're not sending a message to the Houthis for the United States when it's 3% of our trade, and they weren't even targeting U.S. ships. So you're sending a message on behalf of Israel, and JD Vance realizes that the America First movement is strong. People are not really all that for this whole waging war for other countries thing. And so JD Vance hesitates. But then JD says, but if you think we should do it, then all right, let's do it. But let's make sure we get our messaging together because, this could actually fall off a cliff real quick. A person identified in the Signal app as Joe Kent, who is Trump's nominee to run the National Counterterrorism Center, wrote, "There's nothing time-sensitive driving the timeline. We'll have the exact same opinions in a month." So he was kind of cautioning, like, do we really need to do this today? Because they're talking about bombing Yemen. And he's like, is this something we really ought to be doing? Then at 8:27, a message arrived from the Pete Hegseth account. Now, remember, he's writing this as he didn't know these people were actually the people. He thought that this was like he was being spoofed or something. But in actuality, this really was the people. And here's what Pete Hegseth said, saying to the VP, "VP, I understand your concerns and fully support you raising with POTUS important considerations, most of which are tough to know how they play out: economy, Ukraine peace, Gaza. I think messaging is going to be tough no matter what. Nobody knows who the Houthis are, which is why we would need to stay focused on 1, Biden failed, and 2, Iran funded." So they're gaslighting Americans right here. I mean, they're saying, wow, this Biden failed, so we got to correct Biden's mistake. And these are Iran-backed terrorists, and that's why we've got to do this. So nothing about this is good for you, the American. This is instead, we're just doing this to get back at the fact Biden failed, and we're just doing this because Iran, we just have this thing about Iran or whatever it is. Then the Hegseth message goes on to state, which you see here on the screen, waiting a few weeks or a month does not fundamentally change the calculus. Immediate risks on waiting: 1, this leaks and we look indecisive. 2, Israel takes an action first, or Gaza ceasefire falls apart and we don't get to start this on our own terms. We can manage both. We are prepared to execute. And if I had a final go or no-go vote, I believe we should. This is not about the Houthis. I see it as 2 things. Well, I would like to know, Pete Hegseth, what do you think this is about? Because if it isn't about American trade, because it's 3% of our ships, then what is this about? He says, restoring freedom of navigation, a core national interest. Okay, we have literal pirates like off the coast of Somalia. We have pirates all over the ocean that affect probably 1, 2, 3% of U.S. trade. So yeah, I guess you could go after any and all pirates, but to wage war on a country is a whole different thing. So he says restoring freedom of navigation, a core national interest, and 2, reestablish deterrence, which Biden cratered, but we could easily pause. And if we do, I will do all we can to enforce 100% OPSEC, which is Operation Security. I welcome other thoughts. Then a few minutes later, Michael Waltz, the account, posted a lengthy note about trade figures and the limited capabilities of European navies. He says, whether it's now or several weeks from now, it will have to be the United States that reopens these shipping lanes. Per the president's request, we're working with DOD and state to determine how to compile the costs associated and levy them on the Europeans. So here's what's really insane. The ships that were actually targeted were Israeli ships. But they're talking about, look, like this doesn't really affect U.S. trade. It's like really for the Europeans, but it's also major and most importantly for the Israelis. Yet they're going to levy onto the Europeans the cost of this mercenary action. I mean, this is us acting as mercenaries. It's not at the benefit of U.S. national security. This is just us doing a job for you because it's better for your security and your shipping and your trade routes. So now they're talking about, what are we going to get for this military action? So that's how you know for sure this is not a matter of national security that affects the U.S. people, you and me. It doesn't affect Americans. This is just like, we're going to go do a dirty job, but we better get paid for it. Who's going to pay us? I mean, that's what they're saying here in this chat. So he's saying, how do we compile the costs associated and levy them on the Europeans? Like, we got to make Europe pay for this. What about Israel? Israel never has to pay for it, even though this is really decisively for them. Then the account identified as JD Vance addressed a message at 8:45 to Pete Hegseth, and he said, if you think we should do it, let's go. I just hate bailing Europe out again. And we read that message that JD Vance, here's that one. If you think, let's just do it, but let's make sure our messaging is tight. And then Pete Hegseth said, yeah, I fully share your loathing of European freeloading. It's pathetic. But Mike is correct. We're the only ones on the planet on our side of the ledger who can do this. Nobody else even comes close. Question is timing. I feel like now is as good as time of any. Given POTUS directive to reopen shipping lanes, I think we should go, but POTUS still retains 24 hours of decision space. So Pete Hegseth is saying European freeloading is pathetic. But remember, this entire operation is for Israel. The Houthis were very specifically targeting Israel because Israel had gone back on the ceasefire agreement. They had a ceasefire agreement with the Palestinians, with Hamas. And rather than move to phase 2, after phase 1 of the 3-part phase agreement was complete, everybody did phase 1. Israel did phase 1 mostly. Hamas did phase 1 mostly. Everybody pretty much did phase 1, and they were to move on to phase 2. And Israel decided they didn't want to move to phase 2, and they wanted to renegotiate the ceasefire deal. The Hamas said, no, we have a deal already. We want to move on to phase 2. And Israel put the blockade back up. They started starving the Gazans. They started bombing them. And then the Houthis said, well, you broke the ceasefire agreement. And we told you that we would stop bombing your ships so as long as there was a peacefire, so as long as there was peace and a ceasefire. You did that. We stopped bombing. We stopped targeting you. But now you're targeting again. So we're going to target you. And the Houthis were only targeting Israel. So this was just really a thing for Israel. The United States is doing it, but blaming it on the Europeans, like we're doing a dirty job for the Europeans and we're going to make them pay for it. And really this whole thing's for Europe. And they're saying, oh, Europe is freeloading on us and that's pathetic. Well, what about Israel? Because the target was Israel. No one else was being targeted. It was Israel the whole time. And the only thing the Houthis asked for was keep going with the ceasefire agreement. We'll stop targeting you as long as you go back into the ceasefire agreement that you already agreed on. And stop starving the Palestinians and stop bombing them. It's that simple. That's all we want. And then we'll stop targeting you. It's a very simple thing. So we decided to instead bomb the Houthis rather than tell the Israelis to stop bombing kids in Gaza. I mean, that's what we were doing here. So it says at this point, an account called SM joined an account called SM, which I guess, there it is. We have that right there on the screen at the bottom. This one joined the conversation, and it's believed that this person is probably Stephen Miller. And this person says, as I heard it, the president was clear. Green light, but we soon make clear to Egypt and Europe what we expect in return. So they're wrapping Europe and Egypt into this. So they're saying we're going to make Egypt pay and we're going to make Europe pay, but nobody mentions Israel. Says we're going to make clear to Egypt and Europe what we expect in return. We also need to figure out how to enforce such a requirement. E.g., if Europe doesn't remunerate, then what? If the U.S. successfully restores freedom of navigation at great cost, there needs to be some further economic gain extracted in return. And Pete Hegseth says, agreed. So again, we're mercenaries. That's all we are. This has nothing to do with a national security. This is just us doing a dirty job for Europe and apparently Egypt. No mention of Israel. And we expect to get paid for it. That's what the U.S. military has turned into. We're no longer really about America first, national security. We're just about being paid for hire. We're just going to bomb and defend, and it's all going to be paid. It's all for hire. And at some point, you have to ask, who's going to be able to hire us? Is there a limit on who can hire us? Are we just we're going to claim allies can hire us to do these dirty jobs for them? And you might feel okay with that because, well, it's our allies. But who gets to determine who our allies are? And at what point do we say, well, you're no longer an ally. This one who was our enemy who we protected you from yesterday, today they're our ally, and now you're the enemy because they're paying us more. I mean, that's where this leads. There's going to be no loyalty or real, allegiances. When you put yourself up for hire like this, it's up for the sale for the highest bidder. So then the journalist Jeff Goldberg just thought, okay, I've seen this. We'll see what happens. And the next morning, this is where he says he realized, that was a real chat thread. It says at 11:44 a.m., the account labeled Pete Hegseth posted in Signal a team update. And he says, I'm not going to quote it because it gave actual national security information in it. But essentially they were saying, look, we're going to bomb Yemen, and this is when we're doing it, and this is how we're going to do it. And after that, the journalist sat in his car because he was at the grocery store, and he was like, are they really going to bomb Yemen right now? Like, they're saying they're going to do it right now, so I'm going to wait in my car and see if Yemen gets bombed and see if this is real. And sure enough, Yemen gets bombed right when the chat said Yemen would be bombed. And that's when he realized, I'm actually in a top secret conversation that I am not supposed to be in. And he realized this only after the Signal thread said, we're bombing. Here's where we're bombing. This is what we're doing. He checks Twitter. Twitter says, Yemen just got bombed. This is where they're being bombed. And the Signal app, this is what the guys start saying. They start saying, excellent, a good start. Yeah, they start cheering, saying, all right, on target. We bombed Yemen. Good job, Pete, and your team. The team, great job. Everybody, great work. Powerful start is what they're saying. And he realized, I'm in a conversation of national security. I need to exit out of this. So at that point, the journalist exits out of the chat. And he wonders, is anybody going to notice that this name he would just identified as JG, similar to how SM was just, several of them had only gone by their initials, like Tulsi Gabbard was TG and he was JG. And he thought, are they going to notice that this JG left the chat? But nobody said anything. Nobody reached out to him. And he was like, wow, they didn't even notice that they had an Atlantic journalist in this chat thread. And then I exit and nobody said anything. I mean, this is how completely amateur hour this whole thing was. So he goes on and he asks, he starts to reach out and he says, let me just find right here where he says, this is a major breach. He says, I've never seen a breach quite like this. It's not uncommon for national security officials to communicate on Signal, but the app is used primarily for meeting planning and other logistical matters, not for detailed and highly confidential discussions of a pending military action. And of course, I've never heard of an instance in which a journalist has been invited to such a discussion. Conceivably, Waltz, by coordinating a national security-related action over Signal, may have violated several provisions of the Espionage Act, which governs the handling of national defense information. According to several national security lawyers interviewed by my colleague Shane Harris for the story, Harris asked them to consider a hypothetical scenario in which a senior U.S. official creates a Signal thread for the express purpose of sharing information with cabinet officials about an active military operation. And he didn't show them anything that was actually, he didn't show the lawyer what was actually shared, but he says, hypothetically, what would happen here? And he's like, yeah, that would be a violation because you're supposed to do that in a skiff. That's where you're supposed to do it. On Signal, you can coordinate meeting up in the skiff. You could say, hey, we need to talk about Yemen. Let's meet in a skiff, right? You can do that. But you're not supposed to actually plan the bombing of Yemen on an app. You're not supposed to do that on a third-party app. The government has ways of sharing official information like this, top secret information, and it's not over Signal. So there's that. Then there's also the fact that we have cabinet level officials planning to wage war. I mean, they basically plan right there, waging war with a foreign country, which is an act that Congress is supposed to be taking. We have a separation of powers. Congress is supposed to declare war. Congress is supposed to decide when we bomb because we, the American people, suffer the ramifications of this. If they trigger World War III without our consent, and then we start getting bombed in American cities, we better have signed on to that. But we're not able to sign on to that. We don't get to sign on to that because our leaders in America are now just bombing without ever asking Congress. When was the last time we declared war? World War II. That's the answer. Did we even declare war in World War II? I wouldn't be surprised if I just, I'm thinking it was World War II, but I wouldn't be surprised if I look back. Well, actually, we didn't really even declare war then. Says that the other thing to take into consideration here with all of this is So first of all, they shouldn't be using an app. Second of all, they need to be in a skiff. Third, they need to be war needs to be waged with congressional approval. And none of that happened. And this was just absolute amateur hour for them to then also include accidentally, or maybe not accidentally. I mean, maybe there was somebody, maybe Michael Waltz, the national security advisor, did want the journalist in on it because he was like, these idiots are constantly doing this stuff. I mean, one can speculate because it's just such a blunder to add a journalist in accidentally that part of you kind of wonders, was it accidental, or did he add in, or did the national security advisor add in the journalist because he's like, this is how these people run things, and this should be leaked to the press because this is a total violation of the trust of the American people, how things should be done. This is just complete amateur hour. It shouldn't be done like this. And Americans need to know that this is not an American first agenda. This is not what people voted for when they voted for Donald Trump. And that should upset you. And even if you are, the biggest Donald Trump fan and the biggest Pete Hegseth fan and the biggest JD fan, and, JD Vance, give him props. He was the only one in this thread who was like, I mean, this is like 3% for America, 40% for Europe. I mean, really? I mean, I'll do whatever the president wants, but I'm not really all that, for that. Now, let me see here. At the end, when this journalist actually reached out to officials, when he was like, hey, did you guys know that I was in this thread? This is what let me just scroll through this article and get it. So he says, he sent an email to Waltz, and he talked about the messages in the Signal app, and he said he also sent this email to Pete Hegseth, John Ratcliffe, Tulsi Gabbard, and other officials. And he says in an email, he asked, did they know I was included in this group? Was I, on the off chance, included on purpose? If not, who did they think I was? Did anyone realize who I was when I was added or when I removed myself from the group? Do senior Trump administration officials use Signal regularly for sensitive discussions? Do the officials believe that the use of such a channel can endanger American personnel? Brian Hughes, the spokesperson for the National Security Council, responded 2 hours later, confirming the veracity of the Signal group, saying, quote, this appears to be an authentic message chain, and we are reviewing how an inadvertent number was added to the chain. The thread is and then the person, of course, spin. This is the spin. Says the thread is a demonstration of the deep and thoughtful policy coordination between senior officials. The ongoing success of the Houthi operation demonstrates that there were no threats to troops or national security. That's the only thing they care about. They're like, well, as long as we don't put troops in harm's way, we can just bomb the hell out of whoever we want. We can wage war with whoever we want as long as we don't put American troops in harm's way, because that's the only thing that's going to trigger Americans to be upset, is if we kill Americans. But if we kill everybody else, it's fine. And if we do it for hire, even better. I mean, and then, this guy has that gall to actually says, oh, but this thread, can you believe this person says this? This thread is a demonstration of the deep and thoughtful policy coordination between senior officials. Deep and thoughtful. Did you guys see these texts? This is the text. These are the deep and thoughtful messages. No, guys, this is not deep or thoughtful at all. This is just like this is not a skiff conversation where you actually outline who are we going to kill. And they killed children in this bombing. 5 kids were killed. Kids were killed. And they're like, deep and thoughtful conversation happens, And then William Martin wants to, he wants to cover for JD Vance. And he says that despite the impression created by the text, the vice president is fully aligned with the president. Says the vice president's first priority is always making sure that the president's advisors are adequately briefing him on the substance of their internal deliberations. Vice President Vance unequivocally supports this administration's foreign policy. The president and the vice president have had subsequent conversations about this matter and are in complete agreement. So covering for the fact that JD Vance actually hesitated and was like, I don't know. Is this really in the best interest of America? I'm not really sure if I'm all for this. So, I mean, just absolutely incredible that this happened. Absolutely incredible that this was leaked like this. Amateur hour, and not just amateur, like, oh, what a blunder, but beyond that. I mean, why are they conducting national security like this on an app and not in a skiff? Why are they making decisions about waging war that could trigger a serious war and serious consequences for the American people? Why are they doing that without congressional approval? A lot of questions that need to be asked here. And again, if you are a giant Trump supporter, great. But we always have to hold our officials accountable, because no one's going to do things exactly the way you want. And if they did, it would be you. You would run for president. You would be president. You'd be making all the decisions, and you'd agree with all your decisions. But it's perfectly normal to not agree with somebody you support, as long as you agree with them most of the time. And that number's up to you on how much you want to keep supporting them. For me, my number's about 85%. I need to support you about 85% for me to support you. I don't have to agree with you 15% of the time. And I can criticize you 15% of the time for me to vote for you and support you. But your number could be lower. I mean, it could be, well, as long as I agree with you more than 50% of the time, and that's fine. So you've got to be able to criticize the fact that this administration has made a giant blunder, and that this is not an America First policy, first and foremost. Secondly, a lot of other ramifications with this. This was a blunder. This was massive fail, guys. What a mistake. Amateur hour. What the heck is happening? Oh my gosh. But really, more than anything, we want war to be waged by the American people if we're going to be waging war. But at this point, we're so used to it not being, that I don't know if we're going to rise up enough to actually make a change there. But it absolutely should be done. The question is, will it? Thanks for watching this clip from the full Kim Iversen show, which has a new show time. Catch the full Kim Iversen show, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern. Head to KimIversonShow.com. See you there.